Hey everyone, and welcome to another Yogi Misfit Session. I'm Danny Pomploon, and I'm your host. Today we have Samara. Samara, I don't even know how to say your last name. The last couple guests, I don't know how to say their last names because I'm the worst. How do you say your last name?
Zelniker.
See, I'm just not even going to try it.
And my first name's Samara. I know it's it's a different A because I'm Canadian, but yeah. I get that a lot, so.
Okay, wait, you need to introduce yourself then.
Okay. Awesome. I'm Samara Zelniker.
There we go.
Smooth.
Yeah, the last couple, I don't know why, maybe because I'm bad at pronouncing stuff, period, but, and you guys all have, unique names. Stop switching it up on me, come on. Give me something easy, like a Danny.
All good. Unique names for unique people, right?
That's true. That's very good. So welcome to the show. For everyone that's listening out there, Samara and I met. I don't know how long ago was it? A few months back, maybe like 6 months.
Yeah, a couple months ago when I first moved here.
Yeah, and she popped into Yoga Tree and took one of my classes. And I ended up chatting with her. It was about your yoga mat. I was like, oh yeah, I love that mat, blah, 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 blah. And then we started chatting and one thing led to another. And then we kind of became little buddies and checked in here and there about random stuff. And we bumped into each other around the city. And and now here we are on a podcast.
Here we are.
How's your day going today?
My day's going great. And to that same effect, I'm new to San Francisco, but people always ask me, how do you meet all these amazing people? And you have these awesome people in your life wherever you go. And I think that it comes down to soul connection. So when you've done this amazing work on yourself, then you attract other people who's doing the same, who've done the same kind of work. And that's what I felt like I saw in you and why we automatically connected.
Yeah, I agree with that. I remember the one time we went to coffee, we started talking, and I'm like, oh man, she's on my same page. We're both go-getters ready to take over the world.
Exactly. Yeah, doing it from a yogic way, you know.
Yeah, totally. Which means saving the world.
Yeah, it's a big job, but someone's got to do it.
So I know your yoga story, and I know that you were in Canada and then you moved to San Francisco, but I don't think people know your yoga story yet. So why yoga for you? And then I think they need to hear about your yoga story because you had a lot going on.
Sure. I would love to share that. So, yoga for me started about, let's say 15 years ago. I spent a summer in LA and I went to Maha Yoga. I heard that it just closed, but it was an institution in LA. And I remember taking my first yoga class next to one of the Olsen twins and thinking okay, this yoga thing's pretty cool. And it went from an aesthetic thing to really allowing me to drop into my body and connect, beyond all the crazies that happen in all of our minds, which I'm sure you can relate to.
Sure.
And from there I started my yoga journey. And it had fluxes, I would go, the Canadian winters are cold and long, so I'd go to get sweaty on a cold day, or I'd go just because I was hungover or something weird, or because I needed a break from some of the other gym exercises that I was doing. And it wasn't until I broke my foot, which was in May of 2014. No, it was May of 2012, and I was on a business trip. I used to work in the fashion industry, and I was on a business trip in Brazil, and my coworker was waking me up to board our flight, and I stepped down and broke my foot just like that.
Oh no.
Yeah. But it was kind of the best thing that had happened to me. It was a really big wake up call that hey, what I was doing wasn't making me happy. And that clearly if I could, be affected and riddled with stress in a way that, I think that our body gives us signs when we need to see them. So that was my body's way of telling me, hey girl, you got to switch this up. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. I had no idea it was going to lead me to a yoga training, but I was up north and a friend of mine's sister was opening up a yoga studio on the lake. And I went because we went to support her, and I had my boot on, and the owner of the franchise was there. And she said, wow, you're really dedicated to your yoga practice. You're doing yoga with a boot on. And I was like, well, not really. I'm just kind of here to support my friend. And she said, have you ever thought about doing a yoga teacher training? And I hadn't. And that's what sparked me doing it. And I did my yoga teacher training at the end of that summer in August 2012. And I got there and was like, this is crazy. This is yoga jail. Everyone's so intense. We're doing
Yeah.
yoga so
Yeah.
much and people are crying and like, I don't get this. I don't understand. And then by the end, I was totally drinking the Kool-Aid and was like, this is the best thing ever. I feel refreshed and renewed and finally around people who understand me and understand what I'm going through. And they're putting a name to these feelings that I felt for so long. And that was the beginning of my yoga journey. I, started teaching part-time. And then in April 2013, so almost a year later, I went to Africa. I went to Nairobi, Kenya on Africa Yoga Project. It's a non-for-profit organization that trains people from all over Africa to be yoga teachers. And they train people to be yoga teachers. Yoga is the medium, but it's really about the leadership training. And these people who come from nothing, like from slums and are dirt poor, start to create change in their communities. And they do that by teaching classes in slums, in hospitals, in schools, in jails, in orphanages.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've read about the Africa Yoga Project. I actually was going to do some work for them, and then I ended up not doing work for them, but they are a really, really, really cool group.
It's really unbelievable what they're doing. And it was such a transformational experience for me to see people who are my equals, right? But then where they came from and where I came from. And at the end of the day, that it doesn't really matter and that we're all just the same. And so I'm the kind of person I leap. So same way I leapt into the teacher training, not really knowing, I came home and I was like, this is it. This is what I need to do. And I leapt into teaching full time. I quit my job and I didn't know I was going to have to move out of my apartment and sleep on my aunt's couch or what that was going to look like. I just knew I had to do it. And so I started teaching, and that's when I started my company called Mindfulness Matters. And I started teaching yoga in schools and privately and at studios and leading workshops and international retreats. I also started distributing a line of fitness apparel. So it kind of paired both of my love for yoga and my background in fashion. And then here we are. I mean, I taught a yoga teacher training and opened up a pop-up yoga studio and was able to go to Costa Rica and Bahamas with amazing groups of people, leading them through yoga retreats. So I feel really fortunate. And in the past 2 years, I've also added health coaching to that. So I work with people on a transformational level, both through what they're eating, diet, exercise, lifestyle, and then also through yoga.
So you just went like full force, like you went for it. You were like, okay, yeah, this is the thing. I like it. I'm going for it. There's no holding back. Like I want to do this thing.
Yeah, it's something that I've never been so sure about in my life. I think that people say like, when you know, and that's really how I felt. And that comes down to like that intuition and that knowing and to listening to it. And that's, kind of a little bit about what we're going to talk about today is where does your intuition hold weight over like your rationale and your mind? And I think that a lot of people in today's society put a lot of emphasis on intellect and what we should be doing, and that, this is what makes sense versus like what you know in your body to be true. I'm passionate about getting people into their bodies to listen to that voice.
And I know, I mean, I know from speaking to you, and I think people would even pick it up just hearing you speak already, but like you are so clear on like you said, like intention and acting from a place of like pure intention. And I think that for a lot of people, not knowing that sort of language and not being exposed to that language a lot can be like, oh, that's a bunch of hippy dippy bullshit. But in all actuality, it's really listening to your gut. And so what I wanted to ask you is like, how do you live a life of like from intuition and not just because you're supposed to do this, but like really what's meaningful?
Sure. That's a really good question. And I always say it's the hardest work. I call it the path of the warrior, because it's hard to go against what you think you should do or kind of like the way society's taught you to be, but it's the most rewarding.
Well, yeah, because we've been pushed to do those things for so many years.
Exactly. And you start getting into that comparing mindset of
right.
shoulds, right? And so my first thing there is around the languaging that you said. So I always say, where can I replace should with could, right? So instead of I should be going to this thing, or I should be making X amount of money or whatever, I should be eating the blueberries, replacing that with could. So really one of my fundamental beliefs is that our thoughts create our actions and our actions create our lives. So it really starts with our thought process and how we're thinking. And then, so again, the languaging comes into play really powerfully there. I also have done this with myself and continue to do it. It's a journey for sure. And I work with my clients around it, is establishing what your non-negotiables are. So when I compare it to baking, let's say you wanted to make a cake from scratch. And so
I thought I heard bacon. I'm like, yeah, I love bacon. It compare anything bacon. It's great. Yeah. But you said baking. Okay.
Just to clarify. But yeah, so if you were going to make a cake from scratch, you would know, okay, well, I know that I need 3 teaspoons of baking soda and 1 egg and some flour in order to get that delicious, yummy cake. And
Right.
So how can we do the same but for our lives? And when we step into that and we start asking ourselves those questions, it's so powerful because you're never in a situation that you can't handle because you know exactly what to do based on like asking yourself those questions and doing that work.
Sure. What would you say then in that? So knowing that that's probably like step 1, obviously, right? Like what would you say is a great way, if you were to just give a quick rundown, like how do you do that? How do you sit down and discover or write down or put out what your non-negotiables are?
Sure. So that's a really good question. So it starts with asking yourself the questions, because if you don't ask, you're never going to know. And so I encourage people to have a daily meditation practice and a daily journaling practice. And I remember my coaches and my mentors were always like, journal, journal, journal. It's the best thing. And I was like, ugh, I'm not a journaler. Like, no, it's not for me.
Boring.
Like, yeah, no, because like all this work is like, it's not fun or, it is now. But, when you first start, it's, especially around mindfulness and meditation, people always think like, oh yeah, I should just be able to sit for 10 minutes and quiet my mind because like that's easy. But if you were learning how to play tennis or hockey or doing something like that new, you wouldn't expect that you were going to know how to do it within 30 days, right?
Right.
And
totally.
so it's bringing that same amount of gentleness to that. So it's identifying like a daily mindfulness practice, and that can look different for everyone. It doesn't always have to mean sitting in meditation. For some people, running is their meditation. For other people, yoga is their meditation. For other people, it just kind of depends, but it's taking that pause on a daily basis. The same way like you brush your teeth and you go to the bathroom every day, you want to be happy every day.
Sure.
So it's having that consistent practice on a daily basis. So I'd start with that. And then, it depends on where the person is at in their journey, but starting with writing down what that looks like. So I find writing a really cathartic process because it allows you to take all that crazy talk that's going on in your mind and like blurt it onto a page. And what happens when we create space for, when we release those things, I think it's 90% of our thoughts are the same every single day.
Yep.
If we release that and write it down, we create room for inspiration. We create room for other things to flow in. So I would say a mindfulness practice, journaling, sweat, right? So whatever that looks like for you, move your body, be outside in nature. So what's really beautiful about nature is it receives. And what I mean by that is like, it's bigger than us and it's been around longer than us. So it knows.
Right. Yeah. It's smart. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, it has this evolution, like, the leaves, fall off the trees every fall, and it the sun rises every day and the moon comes out every night, and it just kind of has this pattern of knowing. And so, whether that means going for a hike or being on a beach or, whatever that looks like for you, making a point to be in nature really regularly. And then ultimately it's what are you surrounding yourself with? The people, the food, your space, that kind of stuff.
So you write these things down. Okay, so we figure out what our non-negotiables are. Then what do we do with this stuff to then continue to live from a place of where we're not supposed to do it because everyone else is doing it, because it really means something right to us?
Sure. So I think it's like awareness is that first step, right? So what are your non-negotiables? What makes you happy? And that's always going to be changing too. So constantly like asking yourself those questions. And that's why I say it's a daily practice.
Sure.
And then once you're clear on what those are, it's implementing them. So if you're able to implement those things, like I just said, mine is meditation and yoga and being in nature and nourishing my body with healthy foods. trust that when you implement these practices on a daily basis, that everything will work out the way it needs to. And I mean that in the truest sense of the word. Like, I know that can sound like very like yogi, whatever, but it's not always about doing something. So you asked me, like, what do you do? Right. And it's less about doing and more about being. So when you figure out what those non-negotiables are, you do them, and then you let everything else happen.
You just let the work happen on its own.
Exactly. Because that is not something that you can do and fix. And I know you can relate because we're both such doers. It's one of those things. I know.
I don't know what you're talking about.
What do you mean?
Me? No.
I call myself a recovering A-type because, you can drive yourself freaking crazy doing and doing and doing and doing. And it's exhausting, quite frankly.
This is way too close to home right now.
Yeah. You're like, wait, what do you mean?
So thanks for coming on the show today, Samara. We'll see you later. Bye.
Yeah. Why is she seeing me?
Yeah.
No, and you know what? I see me, and that's why I did this work and I do this work. I mean, I say do this work because it's always, like I said, evolving.
Yeah.
And that's why I also feel such a strong need to share it with other people, because I'm not special. Like, people also say to me all the time, like, oh my God, all these amazing things happen to you all the time. And it has nothing to do with me being special. It's for me putting in this time and this work and getting really clear, because whether it's a relationship, a job, a need, a want, you can't give something away that you don't have. Mm-hmm. Right. So deciding what that is for you, getting really, really clear through these tools of like, deciding what your non-negotiables are and then actually implementing them on a daily basis. That's when everything else falls into place.
I agree with that, because I've personally, well, let's give it this last year forever. I've been working my little tushy off to really do my yoga stuff, and I love it, and I love it so much. And people have made a lot of comments like, oh, in general, like you're doing this and that's great. And like, I need to hang out because like, I want to continue to do that stuff too. But in all actuality, you don't just, it's not osmosis. Like you don't get it just by hanging out. You actually have to like go and sit there and do the work. And that's really hard for people to do, because one, you actually have to deal with whatever is in front of you, be it your thoughts or be it a task, but you have to deal with whatever's there. Mm-hmm. And people are afraid to do that.
Deal with what's coming up, right? Because like we're in our society, it's kind of all about like fill. Like if something's not going right, we fill it with alcohol, we fill it with food, we fill it with things that are not so good for us so we can not deal with it and shove it underneath the rug. And when you do this work, it's uncovering all that. And that could be like messy, right? But when we clean up that mess, like I said, it's the best. It's the best feeling. And I see it in my clients that I work with, having these amazing breakthroughs. And they're like, oh my God, if you told me that I was going to be like this 3 months ago, and I'm like, this is just you dealing with your shit. This is just you like looking at yourself and like taking that rug off, and like the craziest things happen to them. And that's why I say like, I'm not special, because it's like, it's so cool what is possible when you lift up that rug and you're prepared to take this work on. And that's why I call it the path of the inner warrior, because you got to be fucking strong.
Yeah. 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 You can totally say that. Yes. Yeah, you totally can. I totally agree with you, man. I completely, like 100%, you have to be strong, not just physically, because you have to have, there is some sort of like physical strength that goes into this. Like not like you got to be able to like lift weights and all, but like you have to be able to get yourself up every day. But two, you got to be able to like put your head in the game and go for it. Mm. And even, like as you were saying, so, doing things out of intention and not because there are so many things that my close, or even you, like there's so many things that you weren't supposed to do, right? Like, a quote unquote, but that it felt right. So you had to do it. Mm-hmm. Or you had to just like sit back and even, sitting back and letting something happen. Like you had to like, that requires strength when you're just like, oh, fuck, what's going on?
Sure. But the flip side of that, because I've experienced the flip side of that too, is when like you kind of break your foot out of nowhere, right? Or you have these like little nudges that you're like, oh, that sounds good, and they eventually become screams, and they tend to manifest in terms of, whatever that looks like, and it blows up in your face, and you're like, oh yeah, no, I knew I should have like quit my job 6 months ago, or I knew that I should have ended that relationship, or I knew that I should have like maybe had like one less drink that night or whatever that looks like. Like it's always going to find a way to come out. It's just a matter of like how much suffering you want to put yourself through.
Yeah, suffering is optional.
Yes,
Suffering.
it is optional, but it's one that we like as humans love to indulge in.
I don't know why.
I don't know either. And it shows up in our yoga practice. I'm sure you see it too when people are holding poses and they're like, their jaws are so clenched or they're,
Yeah.
like there's something so tight. And I'm like, dude, like this doesn't have to be so hard. Like, let's soften your jaw. We're working on your glutes right now, like
Yeah.
so it's funny how it tends to manifest in our bodies as well, as in our minds. And you spoke about being strong. It's like, this is like fitness for your inner witness. I heard that at a training somewhere. I cannot take credit for it. And I was like, I love that. I'm using that.
Fitness for your inner witness.
Yes.
That's calling your own shit.
Yes, exactly. Calling yourself out. And then, the best part of it is kind of what I started this conversation saying is that you become this like magnet for other people doing this work. And so that's a really big part of it too, is a support system, right? Because it can feel like, when you're dealing with this shit and it gets messy, it can feel overwhelming, and it's okay to ask for help and support, whether it's through going to your weekly yoga class or hiring a coach or having amazing people or friends in your life that you connect with. But that just also kind of happens because again, it's all about turning your gaze inwards. It's all about looking in as opposed to like, oh, well, I need the friends before I can do the work, or I need to have like the perfect like body before I can feel good about it. But it's about turning that inwards, because that's exactly what intention is, or intuition is. We got the answers right here already. It's just starting to listen to them.
It's sitting down and listening to them. Yeah.
Taking the time. Yeah.
So you do coaching and stuff. And so if some of our listeners wanted to get a hold of you, they can find you on your website, which I'll put in the notes as well. But what else, where else can we find you? We can find you on Facebook, and I'll put all your social links on there. But you do also like workshops, and I know you're working on a retreat as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everyone can find me at mindfulnessmatters.ca. I also am on Instagram, which is also at Mindfulness Matters. And I teach it here in the city. I teach at Karma Yoga, which is a new studio that opened up in the marina. And like I said, I do online coaching and workshops and retreats. So I have this retreat coming up on April 1st in Toronto. It's a one-day urban retreat. And it's all about living a life out of intention instead of out of habit, what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm also doing another retreat in Nicaragua at the end of October. So it's October 28th to November 6th.
Who are you right now? Me?
I know, right? This is why we connected.
My female counterpart found you.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, that's good. I love that. Yeah, so have that going on. And, I went to Nicaragua. I don't know if you've been to Madeiras Village. That's where I'm hosting the retreat. But I went there at the end of September or at the beginning of September. And I decided I'm taking this trip by myself. And it was kind of, an ending of a chapter in my life before I was moving to San Francisco. And there was just so much magic that was created for me while I was there that, like I said, I always feel like something I discover I need to share with other people. So that's the intention behind that retreat, is sharing the magic of the Nicaraguan jungle and lots of yoga and soul connections and fun stuff. Some surfing too. So that will be really great.
Awesome. I love it. Well,
yeah.
Samara, I was so happy to have you on the show. We've been going back and forth trying to get each other on, and we're both just such busy bees. Like I feel like some magic is going to happen between us outside of just the show.
It definitely will. It definitely will. And I'm like not going to do one thing about it. I'm just going to let it happen. I'm going to follow my own advice.
Totally. Yeah, totally. That's awesome. It was so great to have you today.
Thank you so much.
Do you have anything else you want to say to the listeners before we take off today?
I just want to tell them to just enforce that this stuff really, really, really works. And so, I can speak to that just because of my own experience. And so feel free to reach out, even if, you don't want to work with me, but something that I said today really resonated with you. Like, I would love to hear from you. I find I talk about in my yoga classes all the time, like I get to speak for an hour and then no one else gets to talk. Right. And it's always nice to get an idea on how you're feeling too. So that's what I would want them to know.
Awesome.
I want you guys to know. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, until the next Yogi Misfit session, this is Danny and Samara saying toodaloo.
Bye.